Right, thank you. So welcome along everyone. I hope you enjoyed the keynote and I hope you enjoyed our little sample of some boarding music that we brought straight from the aircraft today. So let's get started. So I'm going to do a little bit about me first, because you just have to. So obviously I love travelling, I work for the airline industry. So my favourite places are Vegas and Corfu, and in my spare time I like to put myself in front of thousands of people in big clubs in London and DJ at Pride events. So we're doing Brighton Pride again this year with Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Holidays, so it's a nice way of combining work and fun. So if anyone wants a wedding DJ, don't come to me because I don't like it. And so my data life, it started back in 2011 at EasyJet, and around 2 years later I was approached by a lovely man called Paul Chapman, who some of you may know. Paul tried to thrust this tool upon me, this newfangled tool called Tableau, which he was very excited about, and to be honest, being a guy who was really good at SQL, and quite a dab hand at Excel, I didn't really see a massive need for the tool at that time. But Paul encouraged me to go on a one-day course hosted by the Information Lab in London, which I attended, and I realised at that point that this tool could be great, but there's a lot of stuff that we kind of need to work out around it, and it works really great if the data's great. And that's kind of back at that time when Tableau didn't do so much of the data preparation area. So I did quite a bit at EasyJet, worked in the Centre of Excellence there under Paul Chapman, and that Centre of Excellence there had quite a lot of resource, but when I moved to Virgin, we had absolutely nothing. So we'll come on to the story a bit later. As you can see, I like a selfie as well. Sorry. So then we come on to what we're going to talk about today. So the story at Virgin Atlantic is, well actually let's talk about Virgin Atlantic first. So I need to actually look at what slides are coming next, don't I? So Virgin Atlantic, now Virgin is a massive brand, but actually we only have 49 aircraft, so it's a relatively small airline. They're all wide-body aircraft, which is airline lingo for huge. We have 33 destinations that we serve directly from the UK. We have 4 bases in the UK. And our destinations you can see on there are mainly in the America and Caribbean kind of area with a few rest of the world. Now, a couple of years ago, we teamed up with Delta Airlines, the second biggest airline in the world. And along with some of our code share partners, which are other quite well-known airlines, that ups the destination count to about 200 plus. It kind of changes every day because of the different schedules that these guys do. And we have about just under 9,000 employees across the world, of which 2,000 are in our head office down in Crawley. And the majority of those people need some kind of analytical insights or data to be able to do their day-to-day jobs, whether it be in sales, marketing, commercial, revenue management. Pretty much any department in the company needs some kind of information. So that's Virgin Atlantic. So coming on to our story. So back in 2000, before 2016, when I joined the company, we were looking at something that's probably familiar to a lot of you guys out there, and that is all of our data is all over the place, and our decision makers, they're doing their best, but they're kind of they're just getting things fired from all angles. So we have our analysts and our decision makers, our data is just all over the place. We had quite a lot of data in-house that was accessed through, in some cases SQL, in some cases pre-made queries and that kind of stuff. But there was also some slightly harder to access data, so web-based or through tools like Business Objects, where analysts had to manually download Excel spreadsheets out of those and then work with them. So our analysts were basically go into whichever data source they felt was they were most comfortable with, and that could be based on their experience or what they preferred. None of these data sources had any kind of consistency or data governance or any naming conventions and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the time it was just almost what the analyst was brought up with as they went through the business. So the analysts themselves, none of this data had any kind of idea of reference or master data. So the analysts would just create their own Excel spreadsheets which held this master data and combine it with the data they've got. Some of our analysts went that little bit further and they created their own Access databases to combine all of this data together and maybe give themselves a bit more power. And I think it's a familiar story across a lot of companies I've worked in the past. So these analysts would combine all this data together with their reference data and try and answer the questions that decision makers are making. And they'll just be firing Excel spreadsheets left, right and centre by email, shared drives, all that kind of stuff. To these decision makers. A lot of the time this would be the same questions and maybe with slightly different spins based on the data source. Some analysts, these Excel spreadsheets would look something like this, which I'm sure you can relate to. It's anonymised, but it probably doesn't need to be because you can't really see anything in there. So that's kind of where we were with our Excel stuff. Some analysts went a little bit further and thought, okay, I'm going to try and make it easier for meetings and the guys that we're serving. So let's just filter these and put it onto separate slides in a presentation so that they've got like one slide for our New York routes and then another slide for something else. So all of that gets fired over to the decision makers as well. And then other analysts thought, I want to make it a bit neater and tidier, so I'm going to put it in a PDF and send it across. So we get the situation where we've just got a load of decision makers pretty confused. They're just about getting through, but it's not great. So when we get to early 2016, one of the insights teams was introduced to a tool called Alteryx, as most of you are familiar with Alteryx, primarily used for data preparation and transformation and along with advanced analytics. But our users didn't really use it for the advanced analytics capabilities. They were really sold on the data transformation because they felt that actually that's going to solve that first little problem where they can start to make it a little bit more consistent from getting the data out of our data sources. So also it's kind of sat in the data source joining and data preparation area. And that was great. But actually what we found was the analysts were creating their workflows, they're creating all this stuff. It was getting a bit easier to be a bit more consistent because they could use similar data sources by creating things like the YXDB files, the Alteryx's own data sources, and share them among each other. But they were still using their own reference data, they were still using their own Access databases to actually use Alteryx to access that. And they prepare the data, but actually it still ended up that they were firing the stuff out the end of Alteryx and firing it all over at our decision makers. So decision makers didn't really see much benefit. Which is where 3 months later, or a couple of months later, we thought we were sold on the fact that actually we can make reports, we can put these reports online and make them interactive, which is where Tableau was introduced to us, which gave you the ability for analysts to create reports in Tableau Desktop and host them on Tableau Server and allow our decision makers to go on the server and actually interact with them. I mean, it's all great, but actually the users were creating dashboards that looked something like that, which is the Excel spreadsheet, but just online. I mean, it's great because you can then click and it goes like that, but it's still a bit, it's not great. And the decision makers were even still getting, this by like screenshots of this by email. It's just all kind of wrong, really. So that's where we kind of were mid 2016, and that's where I guess my story at Virgin starts. So this was all good, but the head of that team at the time was looking for something a bit more, because I think they could kind of see that these tools were just not being fully utilised. So that was where I was given an opportunity to join the company and use my experience at EasyJet as well as in the kind of data space in general to try and change this around a little bit. The trouble is there was only me. So we really had to like work out how we could chip away at this in small little chunks to then make a bigger picture, because there was no ability to add resource like you would in a traditional centre of excellence. And the problem that we were trying to overcome was that actually the analysts were creating some bad habits because they were taking these tools and they were creating their little processes, but the process actually looked something like this, where the analysts would open a workflow that they created, they'd run that workflow, they'd then open a workbook in Tableau Desktop, they'd refresh the data source in Tableau Desktop literally by right-clicking and refreshing the data source, and then they would save that workbook, publish it to the server, and then they would even email the stakeholder to say, actually, the workbook's been updated, did you know? So all of these elements literally were a manual. Every single one of those is manual, and there's an indeterminate amount of time about how long a workflow takes to run, how long a data source takes to refresh. So this was causing a problem, because it's great if you've just got one workbook, one report you're trying to update. Well, it's not great, but if you're a team that's responsible for hundreds of reports and you're having to try and manage a team that's producing this process and they have to do that every single morning, it's just unreliable. And we were seeing reports not going out until 2, 3 p.m. in the afternoon because it was just all stacking up. So this is each of these tiny little bits are the points I tried to solve, basically. And as I say, it was only me, so I had to look at all of the elements of a traditional centre of excellence, things like consistency, standards, training, and work out the priorities about what is the best thing we can tackle first. So obviously you can create a nice little list and work out what you did before and see what you kind of thought. And the biggest thing I heard from the stakeholders at the time was that there's just no consistency in the reports they're getting, as we saw from the Excel spreadsheet. I mean, you could probably argue that they are relatively consistent because they're just a load of numbers, but they wanted some nice designs because they were getting PowerPoint presentations from our more corporate, like people that are producing corporate templates, and they looked really nice. And then on the flip side, they're trying to present these horrible Excel spreadsheets in meetings. So one of the great things we've done in the past is to create some really detailed visualization standards. I didn't feel we needed a massive amount of detail at Virgin Atlantic at the time. So we started off with trying to build out some basic visualization standards to get our analysts actually thinking about the brand and actually following that brand on to the reports. So my biggest tip for any of this thing is actually take the brand guidelines as a starting point. If your company has brand guidelines, chances are in there you've got all the definitions of all the colours that they use, you've got all the fonts, and that is a great starting point. So I use that as a starting point to get the basics. Now, to add a bit of flavour for visualizations, I looked at what analysts are going to be commonly segmenting their data by. So at the time I was working more in our commercial and revenue management functions. So analysts were commonly comparing how our cabins on the aircraft performs, like our upper class and premium economy. So to find colours for those, you just look to simple things like a website, because our brand team spend hours making this website amazing. So if we can just go on there and steal the colours, then they're consistent. And Tableau's got the colour picker tool, which is a great tool to literally just go in there and cherry pick the colours off, and you don't have to do them yourselves. So actually we took that. And then that kind of results in a nice, starting to give you a nice starting point for analysts. So I created a simple PDF, that's all it is, not a PDF of numbers. And with our colour palette, so they could see all of the colour values, how to do simple visualization things like not putting unnecessary color on there, because you don't need to color a chart really, unless it's you're differentiating between two categories. And even the negative to positive diverging. Now, we have a problem at Virgin Atlantic because generally companies use their primary color as their positive, and ours is red. So we just said, that's fine, we'll just swap it around. So we'll have, we'll put red as our negative, but it's not great. And then we found, actually, had a little look through the brand guidelines and found that there's actually a very nice, like sort of just off black that we could use as our positive, with a sort of grey colour in the middle for our neutral. And then using some online tools, you can quite quickly get, like, almost select like seven points between those two, and it will give you the colour values between the two. Just a bit of creative Googling will give you that. So that's how we started to define that. Now, this is always going to be a starting point. It's always going to evolve, but actually the team that brought in Tableau Server and Tableau were seen as the owners of this whole thing, which I was in that team. So getting sign-off for this was relatively simple. You agreed it within our team, and then just took it to, created some sample workbooks, took it to the decision makers and said, do you like it? And they went, yeah. So I mean, it sounds too simple, and I know in bigger companies it could be a little bit harder, but this was a good starting point. And because we were quite a small operation of Tableau at the time, it meant that once we got that, then you can just spread it out, and the company kind of takes it as part of what you're doing with Tableau. So that was our visualization standards, my first little step towards getting some consistency among our reports. So the next thing was, so that's great, but now every time an analyst makes a report, they're going to have to go in and manually put all these colours in, manually do everything, create the headers and footers as we've defined them. So we like to have all of our reports to have a nice like Virgin branded header and a footer, just to keep the content framed and make it look similar to like a PowerPoint slide for when people use it in presentations. And we basically said, actually, we don't care about what's in the middle of it, because we want the analysts to be quite creative, as long as they're sort of using the core colours. So we created a quick reference guide just to summarise those points in the really long visualisation standards document into a more condensed version, and that was just to give a very basic overview of the key points that we wanted analysts to look at. And I suppose the idea of that was, you know, literally having almost a laminated copy on your desk that you could flip over if you're creating loads of reports. And on the back, it would have, you know, like the common chart types, what you would use for each kind of to present various types of data. So, as I say, that was great, but actually there was still a lot of manual effort in these analysts having to make this. So, what the next obvious thing to do was to just give them a template they could use. So we just created a simple Tableau workbook with the header, footer, and all the stuff they needed with the right formats. And you can't quite see it, possibly can't quite see it here, but we separated some, actually made them some areas using containers that they could literally just drop their visualizations into. And down the bottom here you can see you've got a couple of different layouts that we like common ones you use, like maybe stacked on top of each other or side by side. So the hope was there that if we sent these out to all the analysts, they could save it on their desktop and always use this as the starting point. And that was great. That solved a lot of problems, because that solves the problem of people going, I can't really be bothered to do all that, because actually this is simpler, because they don't even have to worry about layout in this one. So that's the templates and the reference guides. Now, the next step for me was like, okay, I'm not lazy, but I don't like doing things unnecessarily. So how can I make it so that actually I work with our IT partners and actually get IT involved in all of this, and try and make it so that we can actually give Tableau Desktop to all of our Tableau Desktop users, but all of this stuff just comes out the box as if it was part of the tool itself. So one that you maybe quite a few of you are familiar with is the that you can add the custom colors to your Tableau Desktop instance. So we got IT to help us out with that. Because of the permissions and things, you can't always edit your own files on your system. So where we do that, just got your Virgin color palette, and all you need to do for that is to edit the XML in the preferences file. And there's loads of online help about that. I think the general theme with this presentation is if you see anything you like, just note it down and get on Google, and you'll find it pretty quickly. Because that's ultimately all I did. It's just having the idea and knowing how to Google it a lot of the time. So yeah, color palettes, pop those in. It instantly means you've now got all of your colors in there. One thing that we find quite complex is we have a lot of different colors when you go to our really low level detail around our seats. So to put those in there saved analysts a lot of time. So the next natural progression was we saw a lot of analysts making KPI dashboards. So let's standardize some of the shapes that we do. So include the custom shapes in Tableau Desktop. That's even easier. Just add them to the shapes folder as a folder of themselves and put all the images in there. And now we've got a nice shapes area where people can get some. I mean, they're little icons really, but they can make visualizations just look that little bit better if they've got, like flight delays at the top, they might have that. Our flights are never delayed. I wish. So the real winner for me was when one of those late at night light bulb moments was actually, the problem we're still having is analysts are having to remember to open that template file before they start work, and a lot of the thing with Tableau is you want to be able to just get going. So could we make that template file available within Tableau without users really having to do anything? And the answer is yes. With a bit of creative Googling, I worked out there's a really obvious place in the bottom of Tableau Desktop where the sample workbooks are, and I kind of want to hide all the Tableau people in the room, but I've never used them, but that's just me. So why don't I replace those with our templates? So it's a little bit more complex, this one, and this is where you do need a bit of IT's help, because there's a bit of back-end sort of configuration on there, but again, it's Googleable. So all we do for this is you put your template files as package workbooks into this massive long folder, and then you edit this samples manifest file. Lovely. And it's just some key things. So you've got the file name, an image for what you'd like the image to show up as, and then the caption, which is what shows up underneath the report, and then a tooltip. So if a user hovers, it gives you them a little bit more information. So we've just got 3 basic templates, because what we have our Virgin stuff, and then we might have stuff that we share with our code share partners, and then we've also got one that we don't intend for online use, so it doesn't have links to all the server and that kind of stuff. And that actually then ends up looking very nice, like this. So there's a link at the bottom there for a guy called Ben Moss. Yeah, just making sure I got that right. Who wrote a whole blog on changing these sample workbooks, and I just kind of piggybacked off of that and used it for this use case. And that was pretty revolutionary, because now when an analyst opens their Tableau Desktop, they've got those there, and they see the words new VS for Virgin report, and they can just click on that and off they go, which I'll show you in the live demo, which I'm still petrified about. So after this morning especially. So that's it, make templates available when the tool is opened. Now the last thing for me was and this was something that we did some great stuff at EasyJet, I think, on, and I've just rolled it on and taken it a step further, is to create some easy to use data sources, because data sources are great, but actually if you can get some common data sources that people always use, things like reference data. For us, route maps are very popular because people love a map with routes on it. So actually, if you can create these and start to put a little bit of standards around them and use some of the features, So one of the great features is that you can sort things into folders, so start to group some of the fields up. We can use the default properties to put comments in, so that we can almost put some definitions into the fields. We can also, which I'll show you in the demo, is actually try and use the tool's functionality to almost teach the analyst how to make like a route map using Tableau, but using a data source. That'll become more clear later. But it's just doing silly little things like that. Like if you take our cabins, for example, and just adjust the default properties so it's always got the right colours in there. When an analyst drags it on, the colours are already there, so then you don't need to worry about that. So that's our data sources. So once all that was in place, analysts kind of needed to know a bit more about, they were craving for some proper training, because a lot of it was just Googling and word of mouth and all this kind of stuff. So what we realised, and it's something we like to do, is to look out and see what's being done already, and then just try and tailor it a little bit, so we're not completely reinventing the wheel. So what we did was we took some off-the-shelf training and just customised it. So our friends at the Information Lab run their one-day Tableau Essentials course, as it's called now, I think. And so we had some conversations with them and said that we love that course, but is there any chance that we could sort of tag ourselves onto the end of it and add our little hour stint on the end? So working with Mike and the guys at the Information Lab, we got them in, and they performed their one-day training with our users, and then I would just go in and add the extra stuff around some of the common data transformations we do, because each business has some very unique challenges around actually wrangling the data, and then looking at our own production process and how users can get access and any access problems. And we found that worked really well, because we knew that every user had a great foundation, because it was the same as the Information Labs course is quite well known as a great one for the foundation. And then we knew that the users also understood all our processes as well, and how they related to the tool. So the next bit was our Tableau Alteryx user groups. Most businesses do these in some way, shape or form. So the important thing for us is I just did not have the time to run all of these on a monthly basis. So it was to make them user-led. So we would just identify keen users in the business, build them out, get them to actually do the admin for the session as such, but also present what they new stuff they were doing, and then almost pass the baton to the next user for the next month. And we found that worked pretty well. And they're still going on around once a month, every 6 weeks. And we're just getting users from each part of the business just to actually run them. And then if they're struggling, then we just help them out by saying, you can maybe present a blog post that you've seen that you really like instead of something you've actually done. And we found that that's a great way to do it on a small budget as such. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to build those out. So another thing was to look at how we start to build up a bit of a virtual community. So we've got a tool called Confluence in Virgin Atlantic, which effectively is a Wikipedia style site. So we just we just put some really simple articles on there. So it's very basic stuff like how to actually get onto Tableau Server. We allow some of our Tableau Desktop users to publish to there as well, so they can write their own articles. And we've got the Tableau standards and procedures on there, so all those PDF documents you saw before. And this links obviously to like our IT request platforms and all that kind of stuff, just to try and pull it all together. It's very much a work in progress, but it's a great start. So that brings us on to also on the Wikipedia, not the Wikipedia, the wiki, is to like a lot of our reports. We found that users were struggling. They were getting quite a lot of emails about how to interpret the data, how to use the data, And although you don't want to say to everyone, go out there and write a massive document on how to use a report, we encourage our users to create user guides within Confluence as well, and give them a template which gives you some basic stuff, like purpose, how a date's, important things that we found, like how a date's handled, because we might compare year on year where we match the day or the day of week, and that's quite important for some of the stuff. And you can add pictures, you can even have videos in there. So we're trying to wait for our first user to do a presentation style. This is how you use a report. That'd probably be me, but so that's those. So actually, what the next Eureka moment was. So I've got this online, Tableau Server's online, so what if I could embed this user guide within the Tableau report itself? Because Tableau reports take web pages. So with a bit of work with IT and a little bit of Googling again, I worked out how to remove all the gumph around Confluence, so taking out the bars and the menus and all that kind of stuff. So now all of our reports have an info page, which is part of the template, that has a nice integrated user guide, which to any generic user just looks like a part of Tableau. But actually, we've got one thing in one place because the user guide is stored on Confluence, which helps us with data governance and stuff, because we can see all of our reports, how to use them all. But actually we've just surfaced that up where the user actually wants to see it, rather than having to go and trawl through Confluence or having a hyperlink. So yeah, that was a really great thing. The only thing that's annoying me is there's a few bits that I just can't work out how to remove. So hopefully soon we'll get rid of those as well. So all of this does take a lot of admin, as you can imagine. So the motto really is share the load and automate as much as you can. So working with IT again, get them to do what they're really great at doing, which is managing access, managing security, all that kind of stuff. So what we decided was actually we would utilise the IT process to get our users initially onboarded onto Tableau Server. So we would split down into really significant departments. So maybe the whole of revenue management, the whole of marketing, the whole of cargo, and then the users would be able to go onto their software request. So this is just using ServiceNow. And that goes through all the IT systems, all the approvals that you need. By going this way, we could get like individual department heads to approve the users rather than me doing it all, based on which access type they selected. And then just surface users onto Tableau Server just by having these groups. That is not how I would name the groups, but that's how our IT wanted to name the groups. So that's what we have to deal with, but it's good. You get used to it after a while. And then, so that just gets people initially on the server, and it means the users we can give initial access levels to each of these groups. So you've kind of got an out-of-the-box solution for your initial access, and then it's just working out the more granular stuff underneath that. So that's where our Tableau champions come in. So Tableau champions normally mean quite a lot of different people, but for us, our Tableau champions are responsible for the approval requests for their area. Maintaining local groups, so that's groups that they make themselves that are within those bigger groups. So maybe instead of the whole of revenue management, they might just do our inventory team or our pricing team. And then they help us with just giving a spot check on our production reports. So we have 1 to 2 users per major business area. So a major business area for us is like our cargo department. And the important thing here is they don't necessarily need to be a Tableau Desktop user, which I think is a lot of the time Tableau Champion is always seen as like the all singing, all dancing Tableau whiz, basically. So they just have to be great at organisation and a little bit OCD is what I kind of call it. And they just have we just have regular catch-up sessions, because all I really want them to do is be really, picky about how these groups sit within each other and make sure they're all named nicely so that it doesn't get messy. So we have regular catch-up sessions just to make sure everything's okay, make sure there's no blockers into how they're doing the job, talk about what kind of reports they would like to have, which kind of brings us on to the admin views, because if you get creative with your admin views, you can really just let build your reports of your own setup. So one of the first things I did was to create a couple of pre-made data sets, as I said before, nice and neatly laid out, and allow our Tableau Desktop users and our Tableau champions to access those. So Tableau champions generally by web edit if they haven't got Tableau themselves. So they can actually go in and create their own views with the template, obviously, and just create them to what they feel they need for their department. So I created some management level ones, they create some for them, and we just use our catch-ups to try and work out if there's any gaps in what we need to know, and then we just work out between us who's going to do what and build out these our custom reports. Because again, it's just not, I just haven't got the time to build a massive suite of management reports. So obviously I've taken all the numbers and usernames out of there, so that's why it looks a bit blank. So really, the summary of all of that is that it's effectively on my own, with a bit of help from my friends at Google and IT. We've taken it from the Excel spreadsheets through all of these little individual steps over to some pretty nice looking reports that are actually being used well, as you could see from the kind of it wasn't actually exponential, it's more linear, the curve on the last one, but that's still good, it's still going up. So really I think the takeaway from this bit is I'm pretty confident that if any of you guys went back into your own businesses, picked one of these things, you could easily get that implemented in the next week probably, or even the next day, some of them. Each one of those points took very little time to do, but actually as a whole they make a big difference in how we manage stuff. And really it's like the agile project methodology, you're always just going for your priorities and chunking it up into tiny little bits. What have I got next? I'm just trying to pad because I don't want to do the demo. So what's coming up? I hear you cry. And that's to avoid the question at the end. So coming up, we are, one of the things we want to look at is Tableau in the cloud and extensibility. A lot of our data is going into the cloud, and Salesforce and a lot of our other systems, so why not put Tableau there as well, so things get a bit easier. And to look at some of the extensibility APIs about, because I can see some great things there about embedding Tableau dashboards into our intranet, all these kind of things, embedding it in Salesforce, just to, again, make it in one place, but surface it where the user actually needs it. And then Tableau Mobile, it's something that is always, it's a great feature of Tableau, but in larger organisations, there's some things you need to get through to make it work properly. So we really want to do that. It just hasn't been on the priority recently. And to the one that I'm quite excited about, and was another light bulb moment, was actually our HR systems are great. Like our relationship between user and payroll, user and department, is really good and it's well maintained. So can we actually just piggyback off that system and get something like tab command or tab admin to query that system and pull back all our departments and our users and actually create local groups of those users to save the load on our Tableau champions, because then their only job is to actually go even lower than that, which is less likely. And then hopefully our desktop users can just go in and go, right, I need inventory to see that, I need pricing to see that, and I need marketing to see that done. And know that when people leave or move departments, it will just sync it. So that's something that's probably the next one that I want to try and tackle, because that is pretty exciting. And I don't know if I've seen it done anywhere else. So hopefully we'll go for that one. So, demo time. Let me just double check the time. think we're good. So the point of this demo is to try and show you how quickly we can potentially make a production standard dashboard. So what I just quickly need to do is just swap the screens over, because no, I won't do that. Because I realised it's great having presenter mode, but actually I can't see what I'm doing, can I? So it's good. So here is, this is our actual version of the Tableau Desktop. So as I said earlier, the user just comes in here, clicks on their template, and up comes the template. Don't worry about that, that's because we're not online. Wi-Fi issues. That's our ultra secure front end. So normally when the user loads this up, it will come up with a conference page that says how to use the template. Why not? And as you can see in here, the template has all these different layouts, including one that's built specifically for those people that copy and paste screenshot a part of Tableau into a PowerPoint, because actually if you export that as an image, that will fit exactly underneath the header of our PowerPoint template. So just encourages people to, if they are going to go down that route, at least they're doing it with some kind of standards. And then the info page on the end, again, it would have a link here. So that is our live template. So I'm just going to switch over to this because I didn't want to risk the whole connecting live to our server. So I've got this pre-made one here and extracted all the data sources. So as you can see here, this user's decided that actually going to do, we're going to make just a view of our capacity for 2018 with maybe a route map and a bit of interaction. So what the users actually come in here, they decided, yeah, they don't really want that at the top, so let's just move that to the bottom, because that's how I want it laid out. I want my capacity down the bottom, and I want to put my route map on the top right. And then, so they're going to go in and start to create their capacity chart. So here's a capacity data source. It's got all of our roll-ups, so what regions we consider things in, etc. So they'll probably want to do like the current year capacity by probably departure, the month of departure, and maybe they want to see that in the bar chart. So that's great, but it doesn't really tell you much, obviously. But what we've done in the data source is actually embed in the data source itself the year-on-year calculation for capacity, because that's a common thing that people are using. So let's replace the year-on-year. And there's a few things happening there. The capacity year over year has got embedded in it that it should be a percentage. So if I put that onto the label, it'll come up as a percentage rather than a very small number. And also we've embedded the color palette. So if I drag that onto color, you get the positive, negative. And that's just already there. So I will name these because otherwise I'll forget and then I won't know which one's which. So there's a really simple capacity dashboard. Obviously I'm doing this for speed. So then the analyst might think, okay, I really want a route map, but I'm not really that sure how to do it. So we've got what we call our step-by-step data sources. So as you can see in here at the bottom, we've got a route map step-by-step folder. And all I've done is renamed the fields as an ordered number. So in here you just get, if I had time, I'd get one of you to come up and do this because I'm pretty confident that anyone could do it, but I think we're running a bit short. So if I double-click that, always the way, isn't it? Let me just quickly regenerate that. I've done that this morning, I don't know why. I thought when you regenerate it once, it'd be fine. And then double-click longitude, there we go. That's already all your airports on the map. Double-click path ID. And then this one, you don't do anything with it, it just tells you to change mark type to line. So go in here, change that to line. And then place path order onto path. So there's a simple route map. So an analyst can get to that in next to nothing. But actually I'm just going to enhance this a little bit, because once I've had a little bit more training, I'll be confident to do something like this. So I might want to just make this look a little bit nicer. Just to give it a little bit of a thing here. So I'm just going to dual axis that and go in here to make those like a darker, let's go for a bit more of a dark grey like that. And all I'm going to do now is just tweak the tooltip a little bit, just to make it look nicer. Pop that in there. And just for the interest of time, let's just format that a bit nicer. Oh, I just copied that, didn't I? Silly boy. There we go. We'll just do the top of it. So now we get something that doesn't work. So ignore that. It's good. You get the idea. So root map. And I've just got to remember on here, let's just pop business region into there. And capacity, and then another thing that a lot of our guys like, they see it on a lot of the online tools, is actually having these like buttons as such. So we thought we'd make a data source that helps them how to do that. So on here we've used the comments to hover for the instructions. There's a few things you need to do here. So place this as average on columns, right click on axis and reduce range 0 to 1, and then right click on axis and click show header. So columns, average, right click, reduce it 0 to 1. Cool. Get rid of the header, and then pop business region onto there, hide it, show header, and then pop business region onto label. So you can follow that all through there. And it says on here, drag button color onto color. So all we've done is just embedded the standard button color into that. And then it just says to hide the tooltip. My preference for hiding the tooltip is literally just go in and delete it. I know that there's other ways of doing it. And that's that could be buttons, that'll do. And I'm just going to put my business region in. I don't think I need to do that, but it was playing around earlier, so it's the perils of the live demo. And then I can literally just go in here, drag my bits in, get rid of that annoying thing that pops up. And then we should be able to, just click in there, just make that entire view, drag that across a little bit, make it nice and, to be honest, a bit of a choice. And then use that as a filter, done, and then publish that to server. Select a couple of departments, off you go. And that was, about 4 minutes, 5 minutes? And that's completely to standards with the info button. It's got a date in the bottom right because it defaults to today. And that's that. And if you publish it to server, you get a nice, pretty looking dashboard. And all they need to do is change the date and time, put a couple of filters in. All good. Thank you very much. So that's a really quick run through of all the little steps that we've taken to kind of create by proxy, a centre of excellence. Just trying to get some of the practices of a centre of excellence in. So that really leaves us to just go on to if anyone's got any questions.
I have a microphone here if anybody wants to reach out.
If you just let us know your name and where you're from. Like blind date, that'd be nice.
From Heidelberg, Germany. Question, please, for your data sources that you've made available for your creators. It seems like you seem to keep those pretty simple. What has been the feedback from kind of the creator community? Do they prefer more simple, or do they want everything to create their own view? How do you kind of maintain that balance of giving them everything and giving kind of intuitive, simple data sources?
Yeah, I think for the data sources especially, a lot of the ones I showed you there are kind of, I call them almost enhancement data sets. So a lot of the time the analysts would build their data sources themselves, and they'll be using our data warehouses that have got quite long and thin views with a lot of columns in. But these data sources allow them to just enhance that data by really quickly joining in Tableau and sort of playing around a little bit and creating things really quickly. And then it might be the case that sometimes that then gets fed back into our development teams to put that into the data source itself. But these data sources are really quick, like ones just to enhance that information when it's in a dashboard. And then they have their own data source on the side, if that makes sense.
Additional questions?
Hi, hello. I'm Julie from London Business School.
Hello.
Question is, do you integrate with external market data? So, for instance, when you see that your capacity is decreasing year on year, can you check if it's because the capacity is decreasing overall in the airline industry?
Yeah, so we, like a lot of airlines have access to capacity data from external providers for the industry, what mainly the markets they're interested in. And it's something we do have. I just showed it to you here. But that's a great example because you could take that capacity data set and then, because I don't know if you saw, we've got the join fields in the top. So one of the joins would be like our origin and destination, our route. So if you make your capacity data set from the other airlines with that same identifier in, then it's just a case of the user dragging in our capacity, dragging in the data set for their capacity, and then doing that join, and then they should be able to literally do a year over year across the two and filter it based on the airline or present it in a scatter based on the airline. It's something that we've done a few times actually. It's really good.
One more question here, Tom.
Hi, I'm David from KPMG.
Hello.
You mentioned at the beginning the interaction Virgin uses with Alteryx and Tableau, and you've talked quite a lot about the standardization of Tableau within Virgin. How have you guys done a similar kind of thing for Alteryx, and how have you managed to roll that out so widely, if you have?
Yeah, I think so. For Alteryx, honestly, not as much. But there's a few things that we tackled a little bit, so won't go into great detail, but like adding the publish to server Tableau app within the install package that we gave to the guys in IT to install. That helps because then you've got the publish to server. But for us, we're really looking at trying to make sure that we're using Alteryx for what it's there for, what we feel it fits in our organisation. So to try and encourage away from the really basic data blends, because we've had examples where people would take an Excel spreadsheet with months across, they'd load it into Alteryx, use a pivot to pivot those months, and then load it into Tableau, not knowing that you could actually just go into Tableau, use the pivot, and those months to do that. So it's just trying to repurpose it, and I think eventually, time permitting, resource permitting, we'll definitely get on to trying to standardise as much of that tool as we can. So follow the same route, really.
Perfect. Hi, Iga from the FDS in Denmark. I just have a question about the championships and how do you actually incentivize people to take on that role? Because I'm assuming that these people have different roles within the organization, and that's not their primary role. So how do you do that?
A lot of the time. So we primarily try and recruit people that are in reporting functions. So they've got that base understanding of reporting, but also. I find it's almost helping because the fact that they almost see themselves a bit of a leader within their little department. So that helps it, and we try and gamify it a little bit by when we have the meetups, we try and like compare whose server's tidiest basically, or whose area's tidiest, and have a little spot check on places, and that definitely helps. And from a kind of organisational side, we agree with the managers that that's what they're going to be doing, and that the managers should encourage it as well because of the reasons why it's a benefit. And I think to take that one step further, when you really start to identify these things, I think we'd probably even look at putting it into either job role profiles or actually targeting it in one-to-ones. Agree with the manager that that's going to be one of their objectives. We're not there yet, but I think that's some of the ways that you can do it.
One or two more questions here. Way in the back.
Hi, Ola from Groupon. I just wanted to ask a question about the comments in the published data source where an analyst can actually see the information on the pills or the marks, whatever we're going to call it, if it's a dimension or if it's a measure, which kind of gives you a description of what that measure actually is. Is there an automated way of doing that, or do you have to literally click on each measure or each dimension to actually put the comments in there?
Yeah, so also on the data source with the tooltip, I think so. At the moment, it is just literally just pasted in there. But I'd like to think that there's some hacky ways because a lot of Tableau's XML. So part of me wonders if you could generate that XML and load it I mean, it's not advised, obviously, but I think that would be the only way. Yeah, so it is a struggle, because if you created a central definitions hub, then you'd ideally, like Confluence, want that to just link over. So it'll be a great way if anyone works out how to do that, that would be revolutionary, or if Tableau works out how to do that, please.
I have a note.
Cool.
Last question right here, gentlemen.
Hello, hi, Yixiang from Sky. So I would like to know how prevalent now is your management report or Tableau base, and how has the journey been, and how receptive from executive from the beginning to now?
Sorry,
How prevalent is your, the last second one?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, first question, how prevalent is now the management report in Virgin based on Tableau, and how's the journey has been? Secondly is how the senior executive been receptive to this kind of reporting platform from beginning?
Oh yeah, so I think I think that when we went from those really basic Excel spreadsheets and showed the ability to pull out some really basic measures, like your top 10 route performance for the last day, to our stakeholders and the other users that use it, it really helped. And I think there was a few gaps in our tool set that we managed to pad to use in Tableau, like making tools in Tableau, which it's not necessarily there for, but it presents data and allows some of our analysts to do their job. So that really helped on the analyst side and the decision maker side. It was just being able to have the common questions that they thought they always had to trifle through a massive Excel spreadsheet, because all they were doing was looking for their top 5 performing routes. So if you can just surface that in Tableau dynamically, they really liked it, and to be able to do it interactively online was what they were after. And it's now getting to that tipping point, I think, where we're starting to produce reports that are a lot more exception based. So it's presenting stuff to the analysts that they need to know about, rather than them having to just filter through a load of different options to get there. And that is always going to help adoption, because it's going to it saves them time ultimately, and they can actually spend time on the big money items. And as soon as they see that they're always hitting the big money items when they're in their one-to-ones and things, they're loving it, because they don't feel they're wasting time.
Great stuff. On behalf of Tableau, I'd like to hand over a couple of tokens of appreciation to Tom and the Virgin team for coming out here and presenting with us today. So
No worries.
I'll hand this over here. And
thank you very
Tom
much.
Barber, dear ladies and gentlemen.